Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. Well, we sit here on another week trying to make sense of senseless violence. Violence that has many of us shaking our heads in disbelief and others with broken hearts. We'll start off in Wisconsin, where two 12-year-old girls have been charged as adults with first-degree attempted homicide in the stabbing of a classmate. Now, police say the girls told detectives they wanted to kill their classmate in hopes of pleasing Slender Man, a spooky character they read about on a horror website. Now, Dee Dee Benkie continues our discussions. We are also joined by Dr. Paitaikes, Dr. Janie Feldman, and via Skype is Dr. Bart Rossi. So, Dr. Janie, we are sorry to see you again here, and Dr. Paitaikes as well. And I say that with very sincerely. I wish we weren't here talking about this topic, but this is just a horrible story about two kids wanting to please Slender Man. Right. Where did this come from?
I think it comes from children who are lost in a fantasy world and so enmeshed in the fantasy that they haven't figured out the reality from the fantasy. And by their age, they rightfully should know, which is why I believe they're being charged as adults.
Well, 19 times they stabbed this little girl. I mean, that's knowing right from wrong and what fantasy is. I mean, so I sort of agree with charging them with first degree. Dr. Paitaikes, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's because Wisconsin has that law that if you're age 10 and above, you can be charged as an adult. Now, that's very unusual, and you can face up to 65 years. Most likely, that's not going to stand because the defense attorney already said that he's going to file a motion for a reverse waiver to bring it back to juvenile court, which I think ultimately will happen. But
if it goes back to juvenile court, yeah, what kind of sentencing, if they're found guilty, of course, would they get?
Yeah, in Wisconsin, the maximum is up to age 25. Okay, so they still can be incarcerated. It would be in a juvenile institution up to age 25. The other reason I think that's probably going to happen is that there's traditionally more rehabilitation offered in juvenile facilities than adult facilities, all right? It's obvious that both these girls have some emotional problems. I mean, the fact that, like you said, 19 times, very unusual. One of them had no remorse for what she had done. So we don't have all the background information, but I think it's pretty clear that there's more severe
and the story is certainly still coming out as we get more details as well. Hey, Dr. Bart, on this awful case, well, actually, let me ask you, Dr. Janie, on this one. We don't normally see this type of crime committed by girls. Right. This was a little unprecedented, if you will, because it's usually the profile has been in these big attacks and these shootings and all that has been the young man.
True, but look at the function and what happened in this particular incident. It wasn't a shooting. The weapon of choice was a knife, as you say, 19 times stabbing. That takes a lot of time and strength, I have to say, frighteningly, but someone who does that is disturbed, I would say, in a different kind of a way than the boys that you're talking about. So with that kind of pathology and being, again, immersed in this fantasy world, I think it's frightening and troubling, but yes, girls can be violent and aggressive too.
Obviously, mental health issues are certainly on the front headlines as we see so much violence across America. Dollars are needed. That's the big thing that's going to be a factor in treating people and identifying people who have mental illness. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here? Dee Dee, let's start with you.
I mean, I don't care if it's a girl or a boy. When you stab someone 19 times, justice should be served. So I think that the girl should be the monster. She's a monster. I mean, 19 times, I don't care how old she is. This poor kid died. There was a murder, so
she did.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. But still, 19 times, I mean, you know, and I think you're right, doctor, that if they're going to be that vigilant, if they're going to be that violent, they're going to do it again.
Do you have faith in the rehabilitation system, Dr. Janie? I mean, it's a loaded question because these girls are very young. If they are tried as juveniles, as you said, Dr. Paitaikes, they would possibly get out when they're 25.
Right.
So do you think that they can really be rehabilitated?
I would really like to think so as a believer in psychology, but unfortunately I think the problem we face is what would the protocol be for just this type of treatment? being as I don't think any of us could name where this has happened already, and these girls need to develop a moral sense that clearly is lacking at this point.
Well, when you talk about a lack of remorse, you're talking about a narcissistic person, you're talking about a person that might not even have any kind of ideas about what is right and wrong. Am I mistaken on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a Charlie Manson type who's considered the most severe type of psychopath who, you know, had no remorse for what he had done. But, you know, the other question I always go back to, and I was on the parole board for a number of years, as you know, and deciding who stays in prison, who doesn't. The question that always came up is, what's enough years? 10, 15, 20, 25? We spend a lot on incarceration. It's over $40,000 a year to keep somebody in. You know, is that the best use of the money? So in other words, is 15 years incarcerated enough? Now, usually, you know, there'll be some kind of change as people get older or whatever. There is, as I said, more rehabilitation. I mean, look, there's no 100% rehabilitation, and I'll be the first to tell you that. But there are people that do make a positive adjustment. We parole about 50% of the people that are in prison because they meet certain standards.
Well, Dr. Paitaikes,
you know,
you work in this field. If you're a 12-year-old, and I'm going to ask the panel, everybody, this question, how many years do you think these girls should get?
Well, I mean, that's a hard thing to identify. I mean, I would say you can put it out there for the maximum, the 25. But again, if it's, unless he says it's a mandatory sentence, periodically they'll come up for parole. Now, they have to meet certain standards or whatever, you know. Now, the reason I say that is I've interviewed like over 4,000 people in prison or whatever, okay? Most of those people started off as a juvenile, right? About 75% of them. And I often thought, geez, if they had the right rehabilitation, maybe they wouldn't be in state prison today, you know. So I think we just have to continue to, you know, offer that, you know.
Why do you think we're seeing so many young kids commit these horrific crimes? I mean, this to me was just a horrific crime. There's one thing with picking up a gun, and I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. Picking up a gun, but this is personal. I mean, this is personal.
19 stabs. And
Yeah.
I'm shocked that the kid's still alive. Thank goodness. I mean, who survives that? But I don't think that should make a difference on the kid stabbing 19 times and doing it for Slender Man, which is to what your point is about it being a fantasy world. If they're going to stab someone 19 times for a fictional character, what else are they going to do?
Exactly.
And you know, we saw the case also in Bristol, Connecticut, where there were 3 kids that have been arrested so far. There's 2 10-year-olds and a 13-year-old. And again, they sent out all these bomb threats to 8 different schools and locations. You had the state and all the surrounding towns so close to Newtown. But again, we're seeing these young kids and a couple of girls.
Well, I think the basic thing is it goes back to parental supervision. Look, who should know their children better than anybody else? A parent, okay? And so that's where it starts at. What was the family background? What was happening behind the scenes? We don't know all that yet with any of these incidents that you talked about because we don't have all the background information. But so again, as a parent, you should generally be knowing what's going on with your kid most of the time, right? You can't monitor them 24 hours a day, but you should have, if you're doing good parenting skills, have something. So I think that's where it starts, basically, you know.
What you want to watch for is a change in behavior in what's happening with the child, particularly a withdrawal. So if you've got a social child who starts to bury her or himself in their room and is on the computer, then you want to see what they're doing on that computer.
Slender Man video games, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
Well,
Sad.
I was just going to say, Slender Man becomes the reality, but why, exactly to your point, Dr. Paitaikes, why didn't the parents know that?
Well,
and of course, we also saw an incident out in Seattle as well, another horrible shooting. I mean, the week before was Santa Barbara, this week is Seattle, and you know, one kid's killed, and thank goodness for some of the heroes on that campus. I want to praise some of them as well. But again, a mentally ill person who specifically said 2 years ago to a SWAT team that he wanted to have some recognition, and we talked about that last week, Dr. Janie, and I think part of it is the recognition that some of these people want. But Dr. Paitaikes?
Yeah, it is. You know, I don't think you can categorize, they're all different situations. I mean, the 10-year-olds, I think that was kind of a copycat kind of thing. They wanted the day off from school or whatever. When I worked for the county courts, in 1 year we had 4 bomb scares. Most of those were kids who were pending court and they didn't want to show up for court that day. Some wanted a day off from school. So they really didn't have intent to blow up there was no bomb.
It's not pulling a fire alarm, is it?
That's not a fire alarm.
Right, but what I'm saying was there wasn't, I don't think, severe mental health issues with them. They all were processed as delinquents. They got some detention time, counseling, etc. So that's a little bit different than the Seattle one. He did have some mental health issues in the past. He went back to the Columbine school thing to look at how that shooting was done, you know.
And how did nobody knew that, and why it wasn't tracked. And that's where I think that we need to go back and start looking at some of the officials, and find out why they're missing this, as they did in the Santa Barbara case as well, if better training is needed. We are going to have to take a short break. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this. We're going to lighten things up with a look at the lighter topics of the week. The lightning round is next.